The story begins with 6-year-old Yuka Okotsu, happily spending time with her grandfather. She has no idea that this quiet family bond will leave behind a responsibility that follows her for years. Her grandfather gives Yuka a ring and tells her it will watch over her. Delighted, Yuka accepts the gift as a promise of protection and says she will keep doing her best. At 10 years old, Yuka lies beside her grandfather's coffin at his funeral. Through her grief, she promises to become strong like the man she admired. The funeral turns into an inheritance dispute. Yuka insists the ring was given to her, but the adults say the cursed object is tied to the Gojo family and must now go to Tsurugi. 11-year-old Tsurugi does not want the ring either, yet the adults insist he is the one suited to carry it. Yuka protests, unable to accept losing the keepsake her grandfather personally entrusted to her. Even with the ring between them, Yuka and Tsurugi remain ordinary siblings who tease, compete, and play together. Their rivalry grows around an unresolved family promise rather than simple dislike. Years later, 16-year-old Yuka and 17-year-old Tsurugi investigate a disturbing string of missing children. Japanese cursed energy has become valuable enough to traffic, turning sorcerers and even children into potential resources. The siblings meet Inspector Marulu va Loi Yelvori, who tells them to call him Maru. A Jujutsu sorcerer from outside Japan is unusual enough, but Maru clearly knows more about the current crisis than he first reveals. Maru explains that his assignment involves learning about Japanese sorcerers and curse users. Beneath the casual introduction is a much larger question. Can two very different peoples share power without turning on each other? Tsurugi immediately runs ahead, instead of following the group's plan. Maru is irritated, while Yuka is already used to her brother acting first and explaining himself later. Maru's fascination with Japanese food briefly lightens the mood. His enthusiasm for takoyaki lets Yuka tease him, making the mysterious inspector seem surprisingly normal for a moment. The conversation returns to Yuka and Tsurugi. The old ring still hangs over their relationship, and Tsurugi's drive to become stronger is inseparable from the promise he made about returning it. Maru criticizes Tsurugi for breaking formation and acting alone. Yuka pushes back, showing that even when she complains about her brother, she will not let an outsider define him. The search through the neighborhood becomes strangely repetitive. Yuka marks their route while Maru struggles with directions, until the group realizes the streets themselves are being manipulated. The repeated paths reveal a barrier or cursed technique designed to redirect intruders. More disturbingly, the same mechanism could guide curious children straight toward the kidnappers. They finally catch sight of Tsurugi and the child ahead. Maru's annoyance has to wait. The trap is already closing around them. Maru compares Tsurugi to his younger twin brother, exposing a personal wound beneath his usual attitude. Yuka rejects the comparison and tells him not to project his family problems onto hers. Yuka claims she only cares about getting the ring back, while Tsurugi focuses on sealing the path used by the culprit. Their words sound cold, but neither sibling is actually willing to abandon the other. Tsurugi notices a child behind the restricted path and immediately moves to help. Whatever the orders say, he refuses to leave someone in immediate danger. A grotesque, cursed creature emerges near the child. Tsurugi is forced into a direct rescue while the others realize the enemy has been manipulating what they could see. The hidden threat reveals itself fully. Tsurugi is furious at being deceived, and Yuka and Maru scramble to understand how the barrier concealed such dangerous presence. Yuka and Tsurugi fight together against the curse. Even in the middle of a rescue, their rivalry leaks through as each tries to prove they can handle more than the other. The barrier is built to hinder sorcerers, forcing the siblings to rely heavily on cursed tools and physical skill. The kidnappers have turned the team's normal advantages into liabilities. The situation reverses completely. The rescuers are now trapped inside the enemy's setup. Tsurugi and Yuka keep pushing forward before the child can be taken away. With Tsurugi and the child in danger, Maru questions whether Yuka truly intends to risk herself for a brother she claims not to care about. The question forces her to confront what her actions already reveal. Yuka refuses to let anyone else decide the cost of her ideals. If Tsurugi dies, she will be the one forced to live with that loss, so she chooses to save him. That decision ends the argument. Yuka stops hiding behind rivalry and moves to bring her brother back herself. Yuka crashes into the fight at the crucial moment. For the first time, she, Tsurugi, and Maru begin acting like a team instead of three people following separate priorities. Elsewhere, an older official is told why the Jujutsu authorities are treating the situation so seriously. The answer changes the scale of the entire story. Aliens have arrived on Earth. The government classifies the extraterrestrial incident as a special grade emergency, comparable to the threat once posed by Ryomen Sukuna. This is no ordinary diplomatic problem. Officials recall the old era of Satoru Gojo and Yuji Itadori while discussing the new value of Japanese cursed. If cursed energy can be bought and sold, kidnapping sorcerers becomes an international threat. 4 abducted children are shown being held like merchandise. Their cursed energy is measured while traffickers prepare them for a buyer. An attacker storms the criminals' hideout and tears through them before the sale can be completed. The ruined district may have hidden the operation, but it cannot protect the kidnappers now. The kidnapper is beaten down with nowhere left to escape. The children he treated as commodities are finally within reach of rescue. Yuka's ability and the question of balance in combat are discussed as she faces Tsurugi. The siblings immediately turn their recovery into another test, of which one has truly grown stronger. Yuka challenges Tsurugi to fight right then and there. Their long-running rivalry refuses to stay quiet even after the kidnapping case. The siblings clash at close range, each already familiar with the other's habits. Their spar looks less like playful training and more like two competitors, finally testing years of progress. Yuka is pushed hard and privately acknowledges how strong Tsurugi has become. His power is built on relentless effort, which only makes defeating him matter more to her. Yuka unleashes Savage Jaw Strike, wrapping her fist in a vicious biting technique. The fight instantly escalates. Tsurugi calls for Maru to throw him the katana. Once the cursed tool reaches his hand, his lack of ordinary cursed energy stops being a disadvantage. Tsurugi combines the blade with new shadow-style swordsmanship. The cursed tool supplies what his body cannot, letting his physical talent and technique work together. Yuka answers with another Savage Jaw Strike, meeting Tsurugi's sword attack head-on. Neither sibling is willing to yield. Yuka follows with Biting Twist, then immediately checks the abducted children and tells the others to call the adults. Winning the sibling contest matters less than making sure the victims survive. After the fight, Tsurugi admits Yuka has gotten stronger. He promises to keep improving too, because he still intends to return the ring one day. A childhood memory shows Tsurugi and his grandfather, revealing that the ring was always tied to protection and responsibility, not merely inheritance. When the ring is formally placed with 11-year-old Tsurugi, he says he does not need it. The adults insist otherwise, believing he is the one most suited, or most in need, to carry it. Training memories show Tsurugi being measured against his powerful family line. He quietly decides to keep the ring, only until he is strong enough to give it back to Yuka. The sibling moment is abruptly interrupted by fresh hostility. Someone attacks with lethal intent, proving the larger conflict is nowhere near finished. The trafficker makes one last attempt to move the children through the barrier, because a buyer has already been secured. A strange eye-like phenomenon appears as the transfer begins. Maru finally activates the power hidden behind his third eye. Everyone nearby realizes the foreign inspector is far more dangerous than he has been pretending. After seeing Maru's power, Tsurugi and Yuka connect the clues. The warning becomes personal. Aliens really are on Earth, and Maru may be one of them. At a government science facility, Japanese officials begin formal preparations for extraterrestrial contact. Disease, language, culture, and security are all treated as potential points of failure. The Sumerian delegation introduces its representatives, including diplomatic envoy Jabaloma and dispatch officer Cross, Maru's younger twin brother. Their fluent Japanese eases the first meeting without removing the distrust beneath it. Japanese officials are startled by how smoothly the visitors communicate. Formal greetings begin, but everyone is still waiting to learn what the Sumerians truly want. The Sumerians ask for cooperation rather than conquest. Their request forces Japan to consider whether an alien refugee population can be accepted without exposing the truth to the public. Behind closed doors, the government debates secrecy, refugee status, and possible Jujutsu exchanges. The priority is to avoid making demands that could turn first contact into open hostility. Yuka and Tsurugi are assigned to participate in the new relationship. Officially, the Sumerians are refugees, not invaders, but the Jujutsu authorities still treat the situation as extremely dangerous. A classified briefing reviews the treaty framework that has governed paranormal affairs for decades. The central order is simple: do everything possible to prevent a war. Officials speak of harmony while Yuka is still processing the impossible truth that aliens exist. Tsurugi points out that Maru had effectively warned them already. Tsurugi connects the Sumerian arrival to the threat level once associated with Sukuna. At the same time, cursed energy trafficking means Japan is facing both an external crisis and a human criminal market. Tsurugi still does not trust Maru. The inspector's transfer from security work and the secrecy around his past make Tsurugi suspect that Maru is hiding more than he admits. A detained informant confirms the visitors are Sumerians, and that information about them has already leaked. Keeping first contact secret may be impossible. The informant taunts the investigators while revealing that the alien presence is already known in certain circles. The team's frustration rises as the case expands beyond anything they expected. The scale of the Sumerian vessel becomes clear. A ship large enough to cross space is being hidden by a barrier so effectively that ordinary people can pass nearby without realizing it exists. At the Kurumayama Highlands in Nagano, Tsurugi explains the markers and concealment around the spacecraft. Sumerian technology seems to overlap disturbingly well with Jujutsu principles. While traveling, the siblings return to the old argument over the ring. Yuka still wants it back, and Tsurugi still carries the burden of a family decision neither of them chose. Yuka and Tsurugi finally admit that both of them are chasing the same conclusion from opposite directions. She wants the ring returned, and he wants to become strong enough to return it. The concealed barrier begins to open. Wind and cursed energy shift, revealing the structure hidden beyond ordinary perception. The massive Sumerian spacecraft appears over the landscape. Tsurugi can only acknowledge the truth now. Aliens are undeniably here. The ship's existence makes the Sukuna-level emergency classification feel far less exaggerated. Whatever the Sumerians want, the Jujutsu world will be forced to deal with it first. Without their legendary grandparents to shield them, Yuka and Tsurugi feel painfully outmatched. Even so, Yuka looks toward Yuta Okatsu's legacy while Tsurugi looks toward Maki Zenin's. Maru reunites with Cross aboard the Sumerian side. Their conversation reveals the split beneath first contact. Maru wants coexistence, but not every Sumerian shares his faith in Earthlings. Cross reminds Maru that he still has duties to perform. Maru would rather enjoy Japan with his new friends, but the political mission cannot be ignored. Yuka and Tsurugi continue their assignment while Maru watches from a rooftop. His unusually distant behavior hints that pressure from the Sumerian side is beginning to catch up with him. Tsurugi mistakes Maru's rooftop position for something alarming and checks on him. Maru answers coldly, leaving Tsurugi confused by the sudden change in attitude. A bizarre new mission begins. A man-eating shark has reportedly appeared in a forest in Gifu. The case sounds ridiculous until they remember that cursed phenomena rarely obey common sense. On the train, Maru and Tsurugi discuss cursed spirits and why they are so heavily concentrated in Japan. The timing of recent incidents also makes Tsurugi question whether the Sumerian arrival is connected. Witness accounts and autopsy evidence do not fit together cleanly. The team has reports of a shark-like attacker, but the physical evidence resembles other large predators. Tsurugi directly asks whether the Sumerians could be testing Japan through an undeclared attack. Maru rejects the idea and insists he is here precisely to prevent conflict. The argument becomes a clash of principles. Maru questions Tsurugi's priorities, while Tsurugi asks whether orders and national loyalty can really matter more than children's lives. Then the reported attacker finally appears, moving through the forest. The debate stops the moment the creature charges. Maru prepares to use his power, but Tsurugi warns that careless techniques could ignite the forest. They must stop the creature without creating an even larger disaster. Tsurugi creates an opening while Maru adjusts to the restriction. Their teamwork improves despite the fact that both are still irritated with each other. The case takes an unexpected turn when they meet an older man connected to the creature. His comic insistence that he is only 46 does not make the situation any less serious. The man is Osada, a former Jujutsu sorcerer who has secretly been caring for a tiger named Torinosuke. The illegal animal is now tied to the recent attacks. Osada explains how environmental damage changed the area and left him desperate to protect Toranosuke. The mission stops being a simple hunt and becomes another question of coexistence. Tsurugi asks the question Osada cannot escape. If Toranosuke kills again, who will take responsibility? Caring about the tiger does not erase the danger to other people. Sensing Toranosuke nearby, Tsurugi deliberately draws the tiger out. He wants the confrontation to happen before another victim is attacked. Toranosuke charges, but Tsurugi speaks to it like an old acquaintance. He remembers the intelligence behind the animal's rage, instead of treating it as a mindless beast. A flashback reveals Tsurugi knew Toranosuke when it was younger. Osada had become the tiger's only real connection to human society. The memory makes the present harder. Tsurugi recognizes that the Toranosuke he knew is no longer standing in front of him unchanged. Osada pleads with the tiger as the confrontation turns violent. Affection alone cannot erase the danger that has developed. The man is Osada, a former Jujutsu sorcerer who has secretly been caring for a tiger named Toranosuke. The animal is now tied to the recent attacks, revealing that the earlier reports did not tell the whole story. Maru worries that using too much power around Earthlings will only reinforce his twin's distrust of humanity. He confides this because he has started to care about the people beside him. A tiger cub suddenly appears. Toranosuke left behind a young life whose future has not yet been decided. Tsurugi gives the cub to Osada and warns him not to look away from it this time. If Osada chooses coexistence again, he must accept the responsibility that comes with it. Maru asks whether trusting the cub is really safe. Tsurugi answers that nobody knows what the cub, or anyone else, will become before they are given the chance. The tiger case ends on the same uncertainty surrounding humans and Simurians. A dangerous future is possible, but that alone is not proof that coexistence should never be attempted. A new chapter opens with Maru's extraterrestrial identity no longer hidden from the Jujutsu authorities. Tsurugi and Yuka continue missions with him under much greater political scrutiny. Yuka treats the alien revelation with her usual curiosity, while Tsurugi remains more cautious. Their next assignment quickly pulls the trio away from politics and into another strange local case. After the fight, Maru's private fear comes into focus. His curse technique is shared with Cross, his younger twin brother, and excessive use can alert Cross to what Maru is doing. The team discusses Masayoshi's age, school placement, and the strange limits of the phenomenon. Maru's unfamiliarity with ordinary human life makes the case even harder for him to interpret. They learn that Masayoshi has made an enormous number of friends over the years. Even a simple recorded greeting has been repeated so often that the boy's long stay at the school becomes impossible to dismiss. The adults try to rationalize why Masayoshi remains enrolled, but the explanation does not fit the supernatural evidence. The case is clearly being sustained by something stronger than bureaucracy. The investigation reaches Masayoshi's home, where the boy is finally spotted. The moment he realizes the sorcerers are there, he runs. A dark guardian-like spirit appears and attacks the pursuers. Whatever is protecting Masayoshi is powerful enough to turn a simple conversation into a fight. Tsurugi and Yuka engage the guardian, while Maru moves to protect Masayoshi. The group separates the child from the threat instead of assuming he is the enemy. Tsurugi realizes the government may be using Maru as a test of human behavior. If the alien inspector is injured or betrayed, a local mission could become a reason for interplanetary war. Masayoshi explains that 3 years earlier, he found his mother collapsed and later came to believe she had become a ghost. His desire to remain where she could still be with him is tied to the repeating first-grade phenomenon. The team enters Masayoshi's house with growing unease. The deeper they investigate, the less this looks like a simple haunting. Yuka and the adults notice disturbed ground around the property and begin digging. The truth beneath the house is far worse than the school rumor suggested. A decomposed body is discovered underground. Masayoshi's connection to his mother's death becomes impossible to ignore, but the scene still does not justify assuming the child deliberately caused everything. Maru speaks to Masayoshi instead of condemning him. Knowing the boy has lost both home and mother, he offers the possibility of a place in the Jujutsu world. Masayoshi asks what a neighbor really is. Maru answers that a neighbor is someone who understands why the things important to you matter and offers to become Masayoshi's first one. A call from Masayoshi's home reveals that the investigation is not finished. More bodies have been discovered, forcing the police and sorcerers to reconsider who is responsible for the deaths. Yuka confirms multiple bodies are buried around the property, suggesting a much longer history than Masayoshi's 3-year story. The case shifts toward an older curse user connected to the site. An elderly suspect in custody wakes and immediately senses that more sorcerers have arrived. His reaction shows that age has not made him harmless. The next confrontation begins with the elderly curse user behaving erratically, as if senility and Jujutsu have become tangled together. Strange summoned figures answer his confusion. Tsurugi engages the old man and his bizarre constructs. The opponent may look frail, but the cursed technique behind him is strong enough to threaten experienced sorcerers. The old man unleashes named manifestations from his technique, turning distorted maternal imagery into weapons. Tsurugi realizes this is not a minor curse user incident. Tsurugi judges the elderly curse user to be extremely dangerous, possibly around grade 1 level. The old man's age hides a technique that is still fast and lethal. Tsurugi pins one of the manifested creatures with his sword, trying to reduce the number of threats before the old man can change the battlefield again. The curse user talks about aging and the ideals he once had for using his power to improve the world. Tsurugi answers that some emotions continue resonating even when age strips everything else away. The old man's obsession with returning to an earlier stage of life surfaces. The repeating first-grade phenomenon now looks less like Masayoshi's deliberate action, and more like the curse user's deteriorating desires leaking outward. Tsurugi realizes senility may have destroyed the old man's control over his own technique. The curse user, however, still claims he has a way to keep his mind from disappearing completely. Tsurugi deploys new shadow style, simple domain, preparing to counter the old man's automatic defenses instead of charging blindly. The elderly sorcerer responds with a technique that automatically intercepts attacks inside its effective range. Tsurugi's normal approach is immediately checked. The automatic interception continues to turn incoming threats aside, forcing Tsurugi to search for a timing or angle the technique cannot cover. Yuka enters after a curtain is raised and attacks with biting twist. The siblings are together again, but the elderly opponent is still controlling the pace. Yuka and Tsurugi bicker even while fighting, drawing a sarcastic comparison to an old married couple. Meanwhile, the enemy's guardian shifts form and attacks through thread-like or needle-like movements. Yuka presses the guardian spirit directly, forcing it to defend instead of freely supporting its user. Tsurugi follows with his sword, attacking from another angle before the old man can completely reorganize the Shikigami's body. The elderly sorcerer recognizes that Yuka and Tsurugi become much more dangerous when they fight as a pair. He also notices that Yuka cannot maintain her strongest output indefinitely. The siblings continue their combination attacks, but the old man reveals how deceptive his shapeshifting technique really is. He explains that human skin can be used like fabric, while the guardian spirit's body is packed inside and reshaped. His deteriorating mind makes the explanation grotesquely casual. Yuka is knocked down as the fight shifts again. The elderly curse user then notices Maru, who has been observing from a dangerous position. Maru's third eye and unnatural presence finally draw the old man's full attention. For the first time, genuine fear interrupts the curse user's confidence. A massive eye-like manifestation appears. The elderly sorcerer's unstable mental state begins affecting his control over the guardian spirit. The trajectory of an attack suddenly changes in a way ordinary Jujutsu cannot explain. Maru's technique is now directly interfering with the battlefield. Maru fully unleashes the strange force behind his third eye, turning the fight into something the elderly sorcerer has never encountered before. Tsurugi watches Maru's power with alarm and admiration. Objects around the gym become weapons as Maru manipulates the situation beyond normal physical expectations. Inside Maru's shared technique, the voice of his twin brother pushes a far harsher interpretation of the fight. If an earthling attacks first, the twin sees it as the justification Samuria needs for war, and believes Debura would guarantee victory. Maru struggles to understand and control the connection while measuring how long he can safely use the technique. The countdown makes clear that his power is not free from consequences. The elderly sorcerer is reminded of the one overwhelming defeat that still haunts him. As the countdown continues, his confidence begins to crack. The old man falls back on rhythm and timing, using a repeated pattern while the objects around Maru become part of the attack. The strange cadence continues as the elderly sorcerer tries to predict Maru's movements. The fight becomes a contest between automatic timing and a technique that distorts normal order. Maru keeps fighting through the pattern, forcing the old man to improvise faster than his aging body. An unstable mind can comfortably manage. The gym is left wrecked. Both sides have taken damage, and the battle is rapidly approaching the point where somebody could be killed. Maru's power burns through the space around him. As the old man realizes this technique can interfere with natural laws, rather than simply producing a conventional attack, the curse user finally understands how abnormal Maru's ability is. Maru presses forward, no longer fighting like an observer trying to remain neutral. Even after severe injuries, the elderly man refuses to stay down. Tsurugi realizes Maru is about to go too far and tells him that the fight has already been decided. Tsurugi thinks about the Earthling factions eager for an excuse to oppose the Sumerians. If Maru kills a human curse user here, that death could become the trigger those hardliners are waiting for. Maru insists he does not want the old man to become the reason a war begins. Yet, the pressure from his shared power is pushing him toward exactly that outcome. Tsurugi shouts for him to wake up. Tsurugi reminds Maru of the word he chose himself, neighbor. The appeal reaches him, and Maru finally regains control instead of letting his twin's hostility decide the fight. Maru calms down and the elderly curse user is subdued alive. The immediate crisis ends without creating the political disaster Tsurugi feared. The old man, still behaving bizarrely, treats his capture almost like another game. His senility has not erased his personality, even after the violence. A snake eyes and fangs seal appears as cursed speech is used to immobilize the old sorcerer. The technique ends his resistance without another lethal exchange. Afterward, Tsurugi asks Maru why he keeps using the word neighbor. Maru repeats his definition: someone who understands why the things important to you truly matter. Another perspective rejects Maru's optimism, arguing that people who have always lived protected lives cannot understand what it means to have safety stolen. The gap between Earthling and Sumerian experience remains unresolved. On the Sumerian side, Cross tends to Maru's injuries while questioning how much biological information Earth should be allowed to collect. Even friendly cooperation has limits. Tsurugi later visits the hospital and learns Yuka has already checked out. Maru is absent, and the silence around him only makes Tsurugi more uneasy. The elderly curse user remains unconscious, while Yuka realizes he may not be the final answer to everything they found. The group prepares to follow another lead connected to Maru. During a Halloween outing, the trio encounters a lost child searching for their mother. For once, the problem in front of them is completely ordinary. The child's tears confuse Maru, who does not naturally understand human family bonds. Yuka and Tsurugi try to explain why losing sight of a parent can feel terrifying. Maru entertains the child with a flashy physical trick, earning instant admiration. Yuka immediately insists she could do the same, turning the rescue into another competition. The child is reunited with their mother and receives a cheerful, happy Halloween. The moment leads into a conversation about how casually Japanese culture mixes traditions from different religions. Maru and Cross discuss Japan's flexible relationship with practices such as Christianity and Christmas. The lack of a single rigid cultural line fascinates them. The conversation turns more serious. Respecting another culture is easier than empathizing with its pain. A comparison about having something precious trampled on exposes how old grievances keep reproducing themselves. Yuka attends a medical examination, bringing someone with her because she hates going alone. The atmosphere changes when the doctor's findings are far more serious than expected. Yuka is told she has a malignant brain tumor and may have only about 6 months to live. She hides the shock behind humor, mocking the situation like a cheap television drama. Her companion reminds her that the memories and moments that made her smile still matter. The conversation shifts toward how hatred keeps forcing people to throw away the future for injuries inherited from the past. Yuka refuses to let her illness be compared casually to the man-made suffering Sumerians endured. She knows she may die soon, while the person beside her still has a future, and asks what really happened to their people. The conversation forces her companion to realize that Yuka is no longer standing safely outside the conflict. Yuka argues that coexistence cannot mean simply living on Earth while pretending neither side can hurt the other. Yuka asks how long people intend to keep stealing from each other just because they were stolen from first. She wants the cycle to end and directly addresses Cross as the person who must help make that possible. A Sumerian flashback begins in a destroyed homeland. The twin brothers grow up among ruins after resistance to the authorities cost their family dearly. Adults begin exploiting the twins' unusual abilities during reconstruction work. What starts as helping rebuild a canal quickly becomes something much closer to forced labor. People realize there are two gifted children and push them harder. One twin stays close to the other, as their power is used to move materials no ordinary child could handle. The twins move enormous boulders for the canal. Their strength makes them useful to adults, but it also makes it easier for everyone to forget they are still children. Dura recognizes the twins and remains involved in the canal project. Unlike those simply using them for labor, he treats the children as people whose choices still matter. Dura is frustrated by how slowly the children learn the work, until one twin demonstrates extraordinary power by smashing through a massive obstacle. The twins study the canal route with Dura. The project is not just construction. It is intended to connect separated communities and change how the region survives. Dura explains the history of competing tribes and why access to water has kept them divided. The canal could physically connect groups that politics has kept apart. His idea of coexistence is practical rather than sentimental. Clean water, trade, and transportation may force hostile communities to depend on one another long enough to become neighbors. The work continues through ruins and exhaustion. The children complain about being used, while Dura insists the future they are building can outlast the suffering required to create it. One of the twins becomes sick or exhausted from the work, and Dura checks on him. The concern reveals that the project has always carried a human cost. Dura teaches them about planting salt-loving vegetation and protecting the canal from environmental damage. When the floodgates fail, the children help repair the system. Council elders finally approach the project after it begins succeeding. Dura refuses their praise, reminding them that nothing would have happened if someone had not started acting first. The twins begin to understand Dura's philosophy as cooperation grows around the canal. The adults who once dismissed the project now benefit from it. The canal succeeds, supporting new settlement, water access, and vegetation. For the first time, the dream of connecting hostile groups produces visible results. Construction expands toward a major port facility. The project that began as a local canal is becoming infrastructure capable of changing the entire region. A Deskunite request proposes building a port along the canal, promising to strengthen the Rumelian economy. Cooperation is now producing benefits neither side could create alone. The twins remember, parents lost to tribal hardline policies, while leaders such as Jabaloma are discussed as people who suffered personally, without surrendering entirely to hatred. Celebration is shattered when a Kalian attacks and kills the daughter of a Deskunite chieftain. One act of violence threatens to undo everything the canal was meant to achieve. The incident collides with Kalian religion, tribal territory, and control of Muru resources. Grief is immediately transformed into political pressure for retaliation. Sumerian disputes can be settled through formal one-on-one duels, and the annual fighting tradition becomes the path chosen to answer the crisis. Dura enters the arena. Dura wins his bout, only to be challenged by the Deskunite side. Refusing the duel could expose his entire village to collective punishment. Dura accepts, because running would endanger everyone behind him. Those close to him know the opponent is strong enough to kill him. One of the children begs Dura to escape and promises nobody will blame him. Dura refuses to abandon the responsibility he accepted. Debura enters the story as the Deskunite champion. The conflict over religion, territory, Muru, and the canal has finally produced a warrior strong enough to decide everything by force. Dura confronts Debura without pretending the political problem is simple. He argues that Rumelians are people just like the Deskunites and asks for coexistence instead of permanent domination. Dura makes his position explicit. Rumelians are human beings, not obstacles to be erased. Debura accepts the challenge and the duel finally begins. Debura immediately demonstrates overwhelming physical superiority, throwing Dura aside with frightening ease. The idealist has chosen a fight he may not be able to survive. Even while losing, Dura refuses to fight with pure hatred. Dabura notices that he avoids damaging his opponent's face, revealing that the two understand each other more than their positions suggest. Afterward, Dura explains what he means by neighbor. Friends who understand why the things important to you matter. The definition becomes a legacy that Maru will carry much later. Dura's death or memorial leaves the surviving community devastated. His plea is remembered as a request to accept Rumelians as neighbors rather than enemies. Dabura remains connected to what Dura left behind, while the twins and survivors face the consequences of the duel. The question becomes whether Dura's ideals died with him. A hidden stockpile of muru is revealed. The scale of the mineral reserve shocks everyone who thought the canal project had been only about water and transport. Dura had secretly separated the muru excavated during construction, intending it to help rebuild Rumiel rather than become another excuse for tribal conflict. A memory of Dura explains his long-term thinking. Canals, cities, and roads can outlive the people who build them, giving future generations something better to improve instead of another ruin to avenge. The twins discover that their own abilities can create or refine unusually pure muru. Their power transforms what seemed like leftover stone into the foundation for something far larger. Maru and Cross decide to leave Simuria and search the stars for a place where their people can live safely. Dabura remains behind, promising to protect the Rumelians in their absence. The vessel finally leaves Simuria. The twins begin their journey with one hopeful goal: find the neighbors their homeland could never become. Back in Japan, political leaders debate whether the Simurian relationship can legally continue. Old Jujutsu rules suddenly matter in an interplanetary dispute no one imagined when they were written. The discussion turns to the Hikari provision and the legal framework around consensual Jujutsu battles. A rule created for sorcerers may now provide a way to settle a conflict between worlds. Officials examine how a formally contracted duel could be recognized under existing law. The possibility is dangerous, but it may be preferable to open war. The name Yuji Itadori surfaces during the debate, reminding everyone that veterans from the previous Jujutsu era still cast a long shadow over current decisions. One official warns that the Simurians must not be treated as weapons, tools, or convenient enemies. Turning them into an adversary would create a problem Japan may not survive. On the Simurian side, the council argues over who has authority to decide their future relationship with Earth. Even Dabura's strength does not automatically give him political control. A hardline voice warns that if Earthlings see weakness, they will exploit it. The memory of having things stolen from Simuria makes Trust feel dangerously naive. Yuka confronts the deception directly, asking whether someone disguised themselves as Maru in order to study humans more closely. The question exposes how much distrust has existed beneath the friendly contact. Jabaloma explains that the council must decide collectively, with votes and vetoes determining policy. No single Simurian can simply declare peace or war. Yuka reflects on how cities and societies are built on choices made by people long gone. The current generation now has to decide what kind of structure it will leave behind. The Simurian Council reaches a majority. The vote settles the immediate argument, but not the emotions that produced it. Jabaloma announces that the Simurians will pursue coexistence with Earth and begin by learning more about Japan through cultural exchange. A protest erupts because Maru is absent from the vote, but Dabura unexpectedly supports the decision. He argues that once an invasion begins, the chance to understand each other disappears forever. Dabura's conclusion is simple: learn about Earthlings first. The Simurians left their home in search of neighbors, so refusing to even try would betray the purpose of the journey. Earth side studies Kalyan beliefs and Dabura's history to understand why his support matters. His willingness to try coexistence does not erase the violence that shaped him. The next step becomes surprisingly ordinary. A cultural exchange centered around a takoyaki party. After all the political speeches, coexistence is about to be tested through food and conversation. Planning the cultural exchange immediately raises practical questions about diet, ingredients, and what the Simurians can safely eat. Even a party requires genuine attention to difference. Takoyaki becomes the centerpiece of the event. The group tests flour-based dishes and argues over taste, treating food as a low-stakes way to learn about one another. The takoyaki party takes shape, with Maru and the others getting drawn into the preparations. Cultural exchange finally feels less like diplomacy and more like people spending time together. Behind the light atmosphere, officials discuss the Sumerian ship's power system. If cursed energy can be converted into reliable technology, Japanese people with cursed energy could become valuable targets again. The government considers what long-term partnership might require, including uncomfortable political compromises. No one wants cooperation to become another form of control. Yuka throws herself into party planning and insists on finding excellent octopus. The normal request soon turns into a mission of its own. Fishermen search for an unusually large local octopus. The creature's size and behavior make it clear this will not be a simple shopping trip. A massive tentacle appears, confirming they have found the so-called ultimate gourmet octopus. Catching dinner suddenly resembles a Jujutsu mission. Underwater, a swarm of jellyfish complicates the hunt. The group has to deal with a natural hazard while still pursuing the oversized octopus. Yuka quietly takes medication and refuses to tell Tsurugi about her illness. She does not want her brother treating her final months differently, so she chooses normality for as long as she can. The octopus hunt continues at the beach. Tsurugi and Maru work together despite the danger, turning another bizarre task into practice at cooperation. They manage to secure the giant tentacle while avoiding the jellyfish. The ridiculous mission succeeds, giving the cultural exchange exactly the ingredient Yuka wanted. Conversation turns to Rumelian warrior customs and gender roles. The Sumerians explain that protection is tied not only to strength, but also to who is expected to stand closest to danger. Tsurugi begins to understand that their customs cannot be judged only through Japanese assumptions. The same behavior can mean something very different inside another society. At Jujutsu High, nutritionist Kyoko Tomo helps prepare the party. Cooking becomes another place where cursed ingredients, ordinary technique, and cultural habits overlap. The group continues preparing food while discussing Deskunite traditions and a curse affecting a relative. Even the casual meal keeps exposing problems that Jujutsu might be able to solve. A Japanese diplomat raises the possibility of using the black rope in Africa, a cursed tool capable of interfering with techniques, to help break a curse affecting the Sumerian side. Permission is requested rather than assumed. The takoyaki party finally begins and Dabura joins the gathering. For a short time, enemies and diplomats simply share food at the same table. Yuka suddenly weakens in front of the others, her hidden illness briefly breaking through the normal atmosphere. Dabura notices that something is wrong. An older Sumerian tastes the takoyaki and unexpectedly begins to cry. The emotional reaction is not caused by the food alone. Tears stream from the Sumerian's third eye, signaling that a vision or perception has been triggered. The party's cheerful mood vanishes. The elder announces a horrifying vision. Earthlings, specifically Japanese, are killing a Kalyan. The accusation threatens to destroy the trust built during the exchange. Japan receives a report claiming Kalyans are being massacred in Tokyo, yet officials insist no Kalyans should even exist there. The contradiction points toward a dangerous misunderstanding. Yuka, Tsurugi, and Maru travel to a Kyoto shrine while reviewing the history of the culling game and the barriers that now confine most cursed spirit activity to Tokyo. They learn that the Tokyo barriers require maintenance and periodic exorcism. If too many curses accumulate, the containment system becomes unstable, and disturbances can spread outward. Tokyo is shown as a largely abandoned, curse-infested zone. Sorcerers conduct periodic purges, turning the city into a controlled battlefield, rather than an ordinary urban center. During the purge, a sorcerer tracks unusual traces through the ruins. The sign suggests something in Tokyo is behaving differently from an ordinary cursed spirit. The trail leads toward a figure hiding inside, or being swallowed by a curse. The encounter immediately feels wrong. The person inside is identified as a Simurian. That discovery explains the elder's vision, while creating an even more dangerous question about what the Japanese sorcerers have been killing. The investigators realize cursed spirits and Kalyans are not the same, but their nature may be similar enough to cause catastrophic misidentification. They rush to stop the purge before more violence occurs. Maru watches how Japanese sorcerers treat curses and struggles with the resemblance to Kalyans. If the two beings share spiritual traits, the Sumerian outrage is no longer based on a simple mistake. The Tokyo hunt continues while powerful sorcerers move through the ruined city. Stopping the purge is not as easy as issuing a new order when curses are already attacking. One Japanese sorcerer is attacked and responds first with cursed speech, ordering the threat to stop moving. From the Sumerian perspective, however, the exchange can still look like an earthling striking a Kalyan. The argument explodes. If cursed spirits and Kalyans are nearly indistinguishable, can Japan keep exterminating them? The Japanese side warns that simply ending the purge would endanger everyone outside Tokyo. Officials explain that cursed spirits are born from human negative emotions, and that no actual Kalyan population was known to exist in Tokyo. Maru pleads for a solution that does not reduce either side to monsters. Japan offers an apology, but the Sumerians question whether bowing means anything if the killing continues. Cultural gestures cannot solve a disagreement about life and death. The trio helps with maintenance, while clinging to the idea that an imperfect solution is still better than surrendering to conflict. Coexistence is becoming harder, precisely because both sides now understand more. Maru leaves to report back to the Sumerians, promising to return. He still believes he can be useful to Earth, instead of becoming the reason the two peoples separate. Before he can stabilize the situation, another clash erupts. A Japanese attacker strikes Cross, and both sides immediately begin arguing over who moved first. Cross is badly injured, and Deborah arrives at the scene. His presence changes the atmosphere instantly, because everyone knows he is far beyond an ordinary sorcerer. The consequences of Cross's injury spread through both governments. What had been a misunderstanding over cursed spirits is now a direct assault on a Sumerian officer. Tsurugi and the others discuss Deborah's strength and conclude that he is effectively a walking calamity. If they ever have to face him directly, survival, not victory, would be the realistic goal. Cross lies injured while the political crisis worsens. His condition becomes the human cost behind every argument being made by both sides. Deborah reaches the attack site and orders everyone to stop. The command is simple, but the terror it creates is enough to freeze the entire scene. Deborah distinguishes the cursed spirits from Kalyans and asks who shot Cross. The responsible earthling admits what happened. With overwhelming pressure, Deborah prevents the attacker from moving. He does not need an elaborate technique to make everyone understand how easily he could kill them. A Japanese sorcerer uses cursed speech in an attempt to restrain Deborah. Unlike an ordinary opponent, Deborah continues moving through the effect. Deborah acknowledges the technique while resisting it, and the Japanese side apologizes for Cross's injury. They beg him to give them a chance to prevent the incident from becoming war. Deborah demands an answer worthy of Cross's life, making it clear that simple apologies cannot erase what happened. The people around him realize one wrong response could cost many lives. Usami offers his own life rather than let more people be killed. Deborah ultimately stops short of immediate retaliation and orders the Sumerian group to withdraw with Jabaloma. The Sumerians deliver a formal demand. Japan must stop further extermination and guarantee the safety of cursed spirits. Japan responds that this is physically impossible under the current barrier system. Japanese officials explain that if curses are not exorcised, Tokyo's containment will eventually fail and the spirits will spread outward. What Sumuria calls protection could become a disaster for civilians. Cross remains badly injured while both sides search for another option. The authorities understand that even a temporary compromise will not solve the structural problem. 1 month later, in December 2086, the curse situation continues worsening. Neither government has produced a solution that both peoples can accept. By January 2087, Japan argues that exorcism is a necessary act under its laws, while the Sumerians condemn the mass destruction of cursed spirits as an international crime. The Sumerians issue an ultimatum: either establish a Rumelian territory in Tokyo where the spirits can be protected, or settle the dispute through a formal Descunite duel. Deborah will represent Sumuria. Japan searches desperately for someone who can face Deborah. Yuji Itadori is considered an obvious possibility, but nobody can reliably locate him or even confirm whether he is still alive. The challenge is formally recorded with Deborah as Sumeria's representative. Japan is running out of alternatives and has no veteran champion ready to answer him. Japan names Yuka Okatsu as its representative. Despite her terminal illness, she accepts the duel that may determine the future relationship between the two worlds. Officials question the morality of sending a dying teenager into battle, but conventional military responses could cause even greater catastrophe. Yuka becomes the desperate choice left to them. Japanese officials discuss how even non-nuclear military options could escalate the crisis, and how closely the world is watching. Meanwhile, Maru remembers the ordinary rock his father once treasured. The memory reveals that the stone was never rare Maru at all. It was simply a normal rock given meaning by the person who carried it. Maru angrily shattered the stone because he could not accept that his father died protecting something so ordinary. He also hid that truth from Cross, perhaps because he wanted the story to remain special. A painful memory of violence returns, along with Debura's apology for not wanting to damage an opponent's face. Maru realizes that kindness and brutality have always existed side by side in the people he loves. Maru reflects on obsession, duty, and the way those beliefs hurt Cross. He begins to recognize how easily protecting someone can become another excuse to control their choices. Alone, Maru wishes he could speak to Cross again. At the same time, Tsurugi studies Sumerian history and notices that the official story does not fully add up. Tsurugi compares Sumerian political structures, technology, and the ship Nalnax with the timeline of Rumelian development. The more answers he finds, the more impossible the history looks. He identifies the central contradiction. A society still struggling to build canals, somehow produced interstellar technology for thousands of people. Something extraordinary must have accelerated that leap. On January 14, the day of the duel, Tsurugi confronts Maru directly. He believes he has finally figured out what Maru and Cross were hiding. Tsurugi explains that Maru can interact with cursed energy and techniques, and that the Sumerians' ability to cross the stars must have depended on the power of one or two exceptional sorcerers. Maru confirms the core of Tsurugi's deduction. The unusually pure Maru that made the journey possible is connected to his and Cross's technique. Tsurugi found him because he wanted one final conversation. Tsurugi asks whether the Sumerians can simply leave Japan and avoid the duel. Maru says the Rumelians now understand what is happening to Kalyan-like beings here, so walking away is no longer simple. Tsurugi reminds Maru that Yuka has little time left and has already chosen to fight. As her older brother, he refuses to accept that she must die today, just because the governments have run out of options. Tsurugi gives Maru his answer. Take the Sumerians and leave Earth. Maru remembers the 2-year journey from Sumeria and everything his people endured just to reach this world. Maru refuses. Leaving Earth is not an option, and he activates his power to show that Tsurugi's demand will not be settled by words alone. Maru declares himself a warrior and clashes with Tsurugi. The argument over Yuka's fate becomes a private duel between two people who both believe they are protecting someone. Elsewhere, the official Japan versus Sumeria duel begins. Yuka arrives in a wheelchair, confirms she is ready, and thanks the attendant beside her before facing Debura. Yuka thinks about her life as Tsurugi's younger sister. If she could be born again, she realizes she would still want that same relationship. Thinking of her brother, Yuka smiles at the contradiction that defines them. Tsurugi desperately tries to act like the responsible older sibling, yet he is often terrible at it. At the venue, Yuka shares a final quiet exchange with the person beside her. They clasp hands as the moment they have been avoiding finally arrives. A childhood memory returns. Yuka remembers trying to save an abducted friend on her own, only for the situation to become far worse than she expected. Yuka admits that without Tsurugi's intervention, her friend would have died. All she could do then was hold the hand of the brother, who never blamed her for failing. Before the duel, a hooded elderly man approaches Debura. Debura asks if he is Japan's chosen warrior, but the stranger calmly says he is only a weary old man. The man introduces himself as Yui, head of New Shadow Style, and says he came to explain the rules personally. He speaks about strength and the brutality living beings carry inside, warning that Debura may finally be forced to reveal his true fearsome nature. Debura tells Yui he is afraid the old man will be disappointed. Nothing can be revealed to an opponent who cannot even stand before him. Yui answers that Debura's loneliness may finally be satisfied. The duel arena settles into silence as Yuka prepares herself. Her final thoughts return to the bond she treasures most. If she were born again, she would still choose to be Tsurugi's younger sister. Yuka suddenly rises into the battlefield as the wheelchair and its parts fall away beneath her. The duel is no longer ceremonial. She has committed herself completely. Looking toward the brother she may never see again, Yuka completes the thought in her heart. Whatever happens next, Tsurugi is still the older brother she would choose. Yuka apologizes to Deborah and reveals her real opening move. Instead of attacking him directly, she begins a dangerous exorcism ritual tied to a treasured technique. The ritual summons the 8-handled sword divergent Sila Divine General Maharaga, the legendary Shikigami associated with the 10 Shadows technique, and one that no ordinary user could safely control. Maharaga fully manifests in front of Deborah. The battlefield changes instantly because the creature's adaptive power makes every exchange more dangerous the longer it survives. Deborah answers the summon without hesitation, launching his own attack before Maharaga can fully dictate the pace. Deborah's technique collides with Maharaga at close range. The Shikigami absorbs the punishment and keeps advancing, forcing Deborah to recognize that brute destruction may not be enough. The narration explains the real problem. Maharaga is an ancient spiritual being built from Earth's cursed energy system. And for the first time its adaptation is beginning against an extraterrestrial opponent. The 10 Shadows technique is reviewed as a Zen-in inheritance, with Maharaga as its uncontrollable final Shikigami. Here Maharaga is being invoked through the exorcism ritual, rather than appearing as a tamed servant. That ritual has only 2 endings: Deborah dies or Maharaga is destroyed. Yuka is already in a suspended death state, so the ritual will continue without her active participation. Maharaga closes in, and trades blows directly with Deborah. Every impact gives the Shikigami more information about the alien warrior it must overcome. Deborah counters with speed and his light-based technique, trying to overwhelm Maharaga before adaptation can progress any further. A destructive exchange tears through the battlefield. Maharaga survives the punishment, and its wheel turns again, signaling that the process is still moving forward. Maharaga attacks with enough force to smash Deborah through the ruins. The duel has become a race between Deborah's overwhelming output and the Shikigami's ability to learn from it. Deborah realizes Maharaga is not an indestructible doll but a spiritual being perfectly suited to fighting Jujutsu sorcerers. Its existence is rooted in Earth's unique cursed energy system. Deborah keeps attacking, but Maharaga begins reading the pattern behind his power. Every additional exchange makes the same approach less effective. The wheel turns again as Maharaga adjusts. Deborah can see that the Shikigami is not simply recovering, it is changing in response to him. The adaptation spreads through the battlefield, while the narration identifies Maharaga's defining ability. The ultimate counterattack is to adapt to any and all phenomena. With Maharaga still standing, Deborah understands that letting the fight drag on will only make the creature more dangerous. The story cuts back to Tsurugi and Maru. They clash with swords, and Maru is surprised that Tsurugi can wield a blade so effectively, despite having no cursed energy of his own. Their sword exchange accelerates. Maru realizes Tsurugi's extraordinary physical ability comes from heavenly restriction, while the cursed tool supplies the energy his body lacks. Maru finally understands why fighting Tsurugi feels so different from fighting a reinforced sorcerer. Because Tsurugi has no cursed energy, his movements cannot be read through cursed energy flow, making each attack feel like an ambush. Maru further analyzes Tsurugi's style. The cursed tool does not run out of energy like a sorcerer would, allowing Tsurugi to maintain a pace that is fundamentally different from normal Jujutsu combat. Tsurugi proposes clear conditions. If he wins, Maru and the Sumerians leave Earth. He believes ending this separate duel could prevent Yuka's ritual from becoming meaningless, even if Deborah survives. Tsurugi uses simple domain and challenges Maru's identity as a warrior. Maru remembers his own fear of losing a sibling and admits that he now understands Deborah's pain. But he is equally afraid of losing his friends on Earth. Maru is angered by Tsurugi's willingness to risk himself while claiming to protect others. He finally accepts the duel seriously and tells Tsurugi he will fight with the intent to kill, warning him not to die. Maru's technique violently flips the battlefield around them. The narration identifies the shared curse techniques of Marulu and Cross as forces tied to chaos and harmony. During the fight, Tsurugi remembers his childhood and the father who disappeared after Yuka was born. With his grandparents too busy to answer him, He grew obsessed with learning what kind of man his father had been. Tsurugi recalls hearing that his father was disciplined and extraordinarily strong. Yet, the disappearance still makes no sense. If Yuka had inherited a technique and he had not, Tsurugi wonders whether that difference changed everything. Maru uses the strange spatial effect again, forcing Tsurugi to adjust in mid-combat. The fight keeps changing directions before Tsurugi can settle into a predictable rhythm. Tsurugi responds with pure physical speed, cutting through the changing terrain, and forcing Maru to keep using his technique defensively. Maru manipulates the space around them, while Tsurugi attacks from angles that should not be possible to predict. Neither fighter is holding back anymore. The distorted sky suddenly returns to normal, and Tsurugi realizes the technique is reaching some kind of limit. He readies himself to break through before Maru can reset the battlefield. Tsurugi and Maru continue exchanging sword strikes at close range. Maru's technique can rearrange the fight, but Tsurugi's reactions keep preventing a clean finish. Maru believes victory is finally within reach, but Tsurugi refuses to accept a certain loss. Even a tiny chance is enough for him to keep moving. Maru accepts the gamble and meets Tsurugi head-on. Their next collision sends destructive force through the surrounding structures. Tsurugi is left battered but still upright, while Maru tries to understand why the fight has not ended the way he expected. A sudden burst tears through the battlefield and catches Maru off guard. Tsurugi has found one more way to keep the duel alive. Tsurugi thinks bitterly about inherited talent and the pressure to leave behind a glorious legacy. For him, being born into a powerful family has never felt like a simple blessing. On the edge of collapse, Tsurugi sees a familiar-looking cursed presence and mistakes it for his grandfather. The spirit tells him that Yuta personally asked it to help, and demands that he say, "I accept." Maru senses immediately that the cursed spirit appearing beside Tsurugi does not belong to him naturally. The source is something far older and more powerful. The mysterious spirit steps forward, insisting that it should be the one asking whether Tsurugi's is ready. The atmosphere around the duel changes again. The spirit strikes Maru with overwhelming force, proving that the new presence is not merely symbolic or a memory. The identity is revealed. The Queen of Curses has been equipped. Rika Orimoto complains that she will report Maru to Yuta in heaven, while Maru incredulously asks whether she can even go there. The narration explains that Yuta Okotsu's rings was restored as a cursed tool in the Gojo family warehouse. It still contains an immense amount of Rika Orimoto's cursed energy, and she remains bound to Yuta's legacy. With Rika supporting him, Tsurugi attacks again. The duel that was already difficult for Maru now includes the stored power of one of Jujutsu history's most terrifying spirits. Maru is stunned by the amount of cursed energy tied to the ring. He realizes someone had poured power into it for years, possibly decades, before it ever reached Tsurugi. Rika and Tsurugi press Maru together. Maru is struck before he can fully adjust to the added pressure from a cursed spirit he never expected to face. Even the terrain stops giving Maru an advantage. Tsurugi uses brute physical strength to force through effects that would normally trap a sorcerer, while Rika keeps the pressure on. The fight shifts through another distorted environment. Maru admits that despite everything, he feels the same desperate need to protect the people important to him. Back at the main duel, Dabura watches Mahoraga and notices a clear change in its demeanor. The Shikigami's adaptation has advanced. Mahoraga now catches or blocks the light-based attack that previously damaged it. Dabura realizes the window for repeating his normal strategy has closed. Mahoraga closes the distance and attacks with terrifying efficiency. Dabura is forced backward by a creature that has learned how to survive his power. Dabura launches another light-based attack, only to see it fail. Mahoraga has adapted enough that the technique is no longer working as intended. Dabura openly acknowledges the problem. His cursed technique has been rendered ineffective. Mahoraga has effectively devoured the technique by adapting to it. For the first time, Dabura seriously wonders whether he is going to lose. The fear pulls him back to a conversation with Duras, who once challenged him to find another way to fight when strength alone was not enough. Dura had recognized Dabura's loneliness beneath his overwhelming power. Surrounded by proud Deskunite warriors, Dabura had rarely been allowed to show uncertainty or weakness. Dabura remembers admitting that he was in pain and afraid during a real fight. Dura's answer forced him to question whether being naturally strong had ever made him a true warrior. Dura told Dabura that words could only explain so much. Someday, he said, an opponent strong enough to make Dabura genuinely fear losing would teach him what strength really meant. Maharaga attacks again as Dabura finally understands Dura's lesson. He remembers being asked to protect the Rumelians, not because fighting is enjoyable, but because sometimes a warrior must fight even when he does not want to. Dabura recalls the people who believed in him and recognizes the difference between fighting for pleasure and fighting because someone has to stand there. That is the kind of warrior Dura was describing. Dabura apologizes to Maharaga and announces that he will fight seriously now. With his normal technique adapted to, he decides to rely on the one weapon Maharaga has not fully neutralized, his own body. Remembering Dura, Dabura pushes his physical strength and speed beyond their previous limits. He resolves to become the warrior Dura believed he could be. Maharaga reacts as Dabura's speed increases dramatically. The battle enters a new phase where light itself becomes part of the physical problem. Dabura accelerates harder and harder, trying to approach the speed of light. The surrounding city is torn apart by the force of his movement. As Dabura approaches extreme speed, even the air and matter around him begin behaving differently. The environment becomes hot, heavy, and hostile to his own body. Dabura forces himself through the physical consequences and declares that he will rise as a warrior. The attack produces an enormous burst over the city. The resulting explosion consumes the battlefield in light. For a moment, it is impossible to tell what survived. Maharaga's wheel and presence emerge through the aftermath. Dabura realizes that adapting to blunt physical force may actually be easier for the Shikigami than adapting to complex techniques. Despite the danger, Dabura catches himself enjoying the fight. Facing an opponent that can truly push him is awakening a part of himself he never had the chance to know. Dabura admits what the battle has awakened in him. He wants to keep fighting, be better at it, and discover a version of himself that overwhelming natural strength never allowed him to meet. Maharaga's recovery makes Dabura think about Earth's healing techniques. He remembers hearing about reverse curse technique and feels a different kind of energy in the Shikigami's regenerative power. Maharaga attacks again while Dabura studies what he just experienced. He is impressed by how advanced Earth's Jujutsu has become. Elsewhere, the duel is causing another crisis. Cursed spirits deep beneath Tokyo begin crawling out in huge numbers, forcing sorcerers to prepare for a mass exorcism while neighboring areas are evacuated. The Japanese side accepts that Yuka is the sole official sacrifice in the duel and orders everyone to ensure Dabura's fight is not interrupted. Both Earthlings and Cimmerians are warned to obey the agreed rules. Inside the restricted area, ordinary needs and rising tension bring Earthlings and Cimmerians dangerously close. A chance hallway encounter immediately has both sides reaching for weapons. Outside the building, a hooded man watches the confrontation and mutters that he expected things to end this way. He is finally stepping back into the Jujutsu world after years of absence. The hooded stranger tries to enter the restricted zone and is stopped by security. Instead of explaining himself, he uses piercing blood. Blood-based attacks rip through the building and scatter everyone in his path. The violence is so overwhelming that the people inside have no idea who just entered. The hooded man destroys part of the structure almost casually. An official finally recognizes him and shouts the name no one expected to hear, Yuji Itadori. Yuji walks through the wreckage as an opponent attacks him. The veteran's presence immediately feels different from that of the younger sorcerers around him. A Cimmerian wonders whether Yuji is really an Earthling, because his presence feels closer to a Kalian. Yuji catches the incoming weapon with his bare hand and answers with a punch. Yuji lands a black flash, telling his opponent that the blow will not kill them. Even after decades away, his control remains terrifyingly precise. Yuji calls out to a nearby official and casually explains that he roughed up the sorcerers in the building but left them alive. He is not here to start a massacre. Government officials confront Yuji over his disappearance, especially because Yuka had been forced into the duel while he was nowhere to be found. Yuji refuses to defend himself with excuses. Yuji says he no longer cares about being seen as Itadori Yuji. Instead, he will handle the curses escaping Tokyo and make sure nobody interferes with the two battles already in progress. Watching the chaos, Yuji quietly asks whether he has finally made the right choice. The question is aimed less at anyone present than at the teachers and friends whose judgments he still carries with him. Back in the duel, Dabura applies what he learned about reverse curse technique. Negative cursed energy multiplied against itself becomes positive energy, allowing extreme regeneration and a new application of his own power. Dabura asks what this form of sorcery is called on Earth, while unveiling a cursed technique reversal of his own. Mahoraga begins adapting again, so Dabura knows he must finish the fight before the next adjustment is complete. Mahoraga attacks with crushing force, and Dabura avoids the blow at the last instant. Both fighters are now changing faster than the other can comfortably predict. The story cuts back to Tsurugi and Maru. Rika joins the exchange directly, and Tsurugi tries to coordinate with her rather than simply rely on the spirit's overwhelming power. Rika produces a massive sword and tells Tsurugi to focus only on swinging it. She will decide how much damage the weapon delivers. Maru is stunned by the cursed tool now aimed at him. Tsurugi sees cursed spirits flooding toward the main battlefield. The separate duels are beginning to affect all of Tokyo, raising the cost of every additional minute. Yuji also notices the huge number of curses moving through the city. Realizing he underestimated the scale, he uses Dismantle to begin cutting them down and pulling the crisis away from the duel. Massive cursed spirits crash through the city as exorcisms continue. Yuji and the other sorcerers work to keep the swarm from overwhelming the remaining barriers. Maru feels the burden of maintaining his technique and fighting Tsurugi at the same time. The accumulating pressure is becoming too great to hide. Tsurugi attacks again, but Rika warns that the strike is too shallow. Maru calls him forward and declares that the duel will end with the next exchange. Rika's manifestation begins to fade, and the cursed energy stored in the ring dries up. She tells Tsurugi to do his best, leaving him to face Maru with his own strength once more. With Rika disappearing, Tsurugi makes a binding vow that sacrifices power for one final burst of speed. He commits everything he has left to ending the fight before Maru can respond. Memories flood Tsurugi during the height of the battle. He remembers family stories about twins, inherited strength, and the relatives who shaped his idea of what power is supposed to mean. Tsurugi thinks about the life his family might have had if certain deaths and inherited techniques had unfolded differently. The memories leave him wondering whether strength always has to be purchased through loss. His weapon falls as the exchange reaches its decisive moment. Even exhausted, Tsurugi refuses to let go of the reason he started fighting, Yuka. Maru asks why Tsurugi stopped when he could have continued swinging. Tsurugi admits that, for reasons he cannot fully explain, continuing the attack suddenly felt like the wrong choice. Maru is shaken by that answer. Looking over Japan, he realizes the people, cursed spirits, and lives here already had places they could call home long before the Simurians arrived. Maru breaks down over the contradiction facing him. If people who lived on their homeland first automatically have the stronger claim, then what happens to those who were driven away and never had anywhere safe to return to? Tsurugi admits he does not know the answer. Maru says he does not either, and the names of Cross and Yuka hang over the silence between them. Back in Dabura's duel, Mahoraga's adaptation reaches another stage. Strange structures and effects form around the Shikigami as it changes in response to the alien warrior. Dabura finally understands what Mahoraga is doing and tries to imitate the concept. He forms a barrier-like structure of his own, asking whether this is the principle Earth sorcerers use. Dabura studies the new technique and even wonders whether Earth already has an equivalent. Mahoraga remains his silent teacher and opponent at the same time. Dabura realizes the adaptation has gone beyond his curse technique. Mahoraga is adjusting to his very existence, forcing Dabura to confront an opponent that learns from everything he is. Dabura reaches a breakthrough and opens his own domain expansion, a far realm of deadly light and living darkness called Inverted Pathway. The alien warrior has learned an advanced Jujutsu principle in the middle of battle. Elsewhere, Yuji encounters a Kalyan-like spirit and listens as Maru's plan is explained. A familiar cursed companion is also present. While the conversation turns from fighting to changing the source of future curses, Yuji hears that the oldest Kalyan-like beings and the spiritual system around Earth may offer a way to create harmony. The proposal depends on techniques connected to Maru, Cross, Muru, and inherited Jujutsu power. Maru states the true goal plainly. He wants to create a world where cursed spirits are no longer born. Yuji demands a clearer explanation instead of another vague promise about harmony. Yuji agrees to help, but insists they first speak to the one person, or spirit, whose cooperation is essential. Maru thanks him, knowing the plan cannot work through force alone. A long-haired curse appears, and immediately recognizes Yuji Itadori. The figure is Mahito, still furious that Yuji has somehow remained alive long enough to find him again. Mahito explodes in anger at seeing Yuji, while Yuji reveals that he came here on someone else's request. The two old enemies are facing each other again, in a realm where death works differently. The plan is explained in more detail. A technique that interferes with souls could be strengthened using cursed energy inherited from Okatsu's line, allowing the structure of future human souls to be changed. But first, Mahito must be subjugated. Yuji and Maru confirm the rules of the ritual. Because this place is a crossroads of souls, rather than an ordinary battlefield, defeat and subjugation matter more than conventional death. Mahito immediately attacks, furious that Yuji is speaking as if victory is guaranteed. Their old hatreds erupts again despite the completely different purpose of the encounter. Yuji reminds Mahito of Shibuya, while Mahito insists that if he has a body here, he can still kill Yuji. The curse is thrilled by the chance to resume the fight he never emotionally finished. Mahito unleashes idol transfiguration. The technique that once defined his terror returns in the soul realm, where its connection to identity is even more direct. Mahito argues that this realm is built from memories and the essence of souls. Even trying to appear younger or alter himself is immediately corrected, revealing how strictly the space preserves what a soul really is. Mahito is abruptly torn apart under the ritual's rules. Yuji's overwhelming advantage makes it clear that their old rivalry no longer exists on equal terms. The story briefly returns to Dabura's battlefield, where enormous structures created by the domain and Maharaga's adaptation continue reshaping the ruined city. Maru tells Tsurugi he is sorry but must use one more thing. The duel's aftermath is still tied to the larger soul plan now unfolding elsewhere. At the crossroads, Yuji explains that souls normally cannot interfere with one another freely. A figure seen earlier was only temporarily restored through the effect of a technique and no longer possesses ordinary cursed energy. A small Kallian-like spirit is brought forward so the group can confirm the last piece of information they need. What truly distinguishes Kallians, cursed spirits, and other souls. Maru explains that cursed spirits form when cursed energy leaking from humans accumulates and takes shape. To stop that process, they identify two theoretical paths: remove cursed energy from Japanese people, or make everyone a sorcerer. The group rejects the second option as too dangerous. Even if everyone became a sorcerer, curse user violence would replace the threat of ordinary spirits, and not everyone has the potential for Jujutsu in the first place. Maru argues that the world is better because Earthlings and Simurians met, even if the solution is imperfect. Yuji does not disagree, but points out the enormous moral cost of altering people without consent. The possibility is debated further. Cursed energy might naturally become less important over centuries, so forcibly changing everyone now could sacrifice bodily autonomy for a future that might arrive on its own. Yuji makes the difficult decision to proceed anyway. He accepts that the choice is morally compromised, but believes leaving the system unchanged would also condemn future generations to the same cycle. Even Yuji's decision comes with strict limits. They will not alter the souls of current sorcerers, or Simurians, and will restrict the change to non-sorcerers and people born from this point forward. The discussion reaches a hard limit. Even if cursed energy disappeared from Japanese people, cursed spirits would not vanish completely. People overseas also possess small amounts of cursed energy, and spirits born beyond Japan would remain. Maru explains why those foreign curses are usually weak. Outside Japan, cursed energy rarely grows dense enough to take shape. But over the last 30 years, more overseas cursed energy has begun flowing into Tokyo, changing that balance. So Maru corrects Yuji's assumption. The goal is not to erase every trace of cursed energy from humanity, but to remove as much as realistically possible. If his technique can do that, he believes the number of future curses can be drastically reduced. Yet another problem remains. Even with fewer curses, conflict between humans, Simurians, and the beings they call Kallians could continue. Maru proposes removing the very reason his people mistake cursed spirits for Kallians in the first place. To find that reason, they examine a small Kallian-like being. Cursed spirits and Kallian may look different, but both are entities whose existence is tied to a spiritual vessel. So appearances alone cannot explain the confusion. An older memory provides the clue. A being once treated like a cursed spirit had actually carried a nature closer to the Kallians, suggesting that what Maru's people recognize is not appearance, but something deeper in the soul itself. That leads to the decisive answer. The color of their spirits is the same. Kallians and cursed spirits occupy different kinds of vessels, yet Maru's people perceive the underlying spirit in a similar way. Maru finally reveals his solution. Using the pathway that connects every soul on Earth, he will reshape that pathway so future souls are born differently, reducing the cursed energy they release and changing how those souls are perceived. Before the plan moves forward, Maru turns his thoughts toward Dabura and apologizes. A remembered promise, telling Dabura to go ahead and take what he needed, underscores the duty that brought the warrior all the way to Earth. Maru admits he interfered in the battle between warriors and asks Dabura to forgive him. Dabura says he came to Earth to keep that promise. After confirming Maru is safe, he considers that duty complete. But Dabura corrects himself with a smile. He also came because he finally wanted to catch up with true warriors. With that achieved, he prepares to return home, and thanks Yuji for the technique that helped bring the conflict to its end. Yuji accepts the thanks, but the job is not over yet. Maru apologizes for dragging him into something so enormous, while Yuji points out that one final task still remains. Maru decides that final burden is something he should carry himself. The others accept that choice, agreeing to leave the rest to one another, rather than forcing every responsibility onto a single person. Standing above Tokyo, Maru looks down at the countless cursed spirits still scattered across the city. The plan may save future generations, but it cannot erase the lives and suffering already created by the old system. Maru apologizes to the cursed spirits and accepts the weight of what he is about to do. If this is a grave sin, then he will carry that sin together with the resolve needed to change what comes next. He does not have to carry it alone. Yuji and the others reach out, joining hands as they begin the final operation together. For once, the answer to isolation is painfully simple. Everyone is here. Those gathered exchange quiet looks as the technique takes hold. Dabura watches the result and offers a simple word of thanks, while Maru finally allows himself to breathe. Across the ruined city, countless points of light begin to rise. Cross watches the phenomenon from afar, as Tokyo's night sky fills with the visible aftermath of the operation. The people witnessing it realize this is not an ordinary exorcism. Instead of feeling violent or cruel, the lights feel strangely gentle, as if something long trapped is finally being allowed to rest. One survivor stares upward and understands what has happened. Yuji really did it. Around the rubble, the remaining spiritual presences fade without the usual brutality of an exorcism. Yuka wakes among the ruins and immediately notices something impossible. She feels fine. Her medical device suddenly reacts, and Maru turns toward her in surprise as the implication begins to sink in. Nearby, Tsurugi wakes and calls Yuka's name. Once Maru confirms she is safe, he helps the exhausted Tsurugi to his feet, and the two finally start heading back. Far away on Samuria, Dabura returns to his people. The warrior who left to fulfill an old promise has come home carrying the consequences of everything he learned on Earth. The change reaches Samuria as well. When the curse afflicting a young woman lifts, her family can hardly believe it, and the relief confirms that the effects of the operation were not limited to Earth. Then a far more violent change begins. A massive Samurian structure suddenly fractures and collapses, sending debris crashing down as the people below stare up in panic. The crowd realizes the collapsing structure is Laura Luca. As chaos spreads, they turn toward Captain Dabura, demanding to know what is happening and what he intends to do next. Dabura answers by seizing control of the situation himself. Standing over the stunned Descunites, he declares that from this moment forward, he is the patriarch of Descunite. His first order is not conquest. Dabura commands them to build a crypt for the fallen man whose promise ultimately changed the path of both worlds, and to remember him as a hero. And then Dabura delivers the most Dabura-like follow-up possible. After taking the position of patriarch, he immediately says he will abdicate and leave the political mess to everyone else. The crowd erupts in disbelief. Back on Earth, researchers confirm the spiritual discovery at the center of Maru's plan. Cursed spirits and Kalians possess the same color of soul, explaining why Maru's people had long mistaken one for the other. But changing future souls creates a new problem. Those born after the operation will possess a different soul color from Kalians, meaning Kalians may no longer recognize future members of Maru's people as beings they should avoid hunting. The Sumerian Council therefore faces a new question. What should their relationship with Kalians become now? Maru admits he once considered killing Kalians alongside cursed spirits, and asks the council to decide with full knowledge of the consequences. The answer cannot be simple. If Kalians begin preying on their children, coexistence may become impossible, but treating them as nothing more than animals would betray everything the Sumerians claim to have learned. Meanwhile, Yuji visits the cursed warehouse and reunites with an old friend. Panda greets him with a familiar smile, marking the return of another survivor from the previous generation. Yuji's next stop is even more personal. Carrying a tiny panda, he casually greets Nobara Kugisaki after disappearing for far too long. Her furious reaction proves that some friendships survive decades by refusing to become polite. The Sumerian Council reaches a unanimous decision. They will live together with the Kalians. Kalians are part of their world and their way of life, so they refuse to abandon them simply because coexistence has become harder. That decision comes with responsibility. The Sumerians will not allow Kalians to slaughter rival tribes, but they also will not permit rival tribes to exterminate Kalians. In their eyes, Kalians are family, and family must be protected on both sides. Back in Japan, Tsurugi and Yuka finally receive the lecture they had coming. Their elder scolds them for hiding their killing intent, going to Tokyo alone, and accepting a private duel with aliens as if surviving it made everything acceptable. The anger quickly gives way to something warmer. Their family reminds them that the people who raised them worked desperately hard, and that being able to watch the next generation live, itself something worth being proud of. Yuji, Nobara, and Panda talk about the fear that shaped their younger years, the terror of friends dying, of humans becoming curses, and of losing everyone while trying to protect them. Yuji realizes he cannot keep living only for people who are already gone. Yuji admits that chasing the past made him neglect what he should have been doing in the present. Ironically, the aliens accomplished something he had given up on decades ago. They forced him to look forward again. With that realization, Yuji chooses a new purpose, helping people while he still can. He asks Kugisaki to work with him, and Nobara answers exactly as he hoped. Sounds good. The old friends begin planning for Jujutsu Society's next era. With fewer sorcerers expected to be born, they discuss preserving countermeasures, maintaining barrier knowledge, and passing exorcism techniques to whoever comes after them. Yuji admits the hardest part will be long-term stability. The three families can cooperate for now, and he may even become a cursed object one day. But Tokyo's safety still has to survive for hundreds of years after they are gone. No plan can guarantee the future. Cursed energy could become necessary again someday, and old knowledge may have to be recovered. Yuji can only hope future generations will find their own answer, and quietly wishes Fushiguro were here to help think it through. The government confirms that cursed spirits have disappeared from Japan for now, but that victory creates a new political danger. If Maru technology becomes public, resentment could easily be redirected toward the Sumerians as the next convenient enemy. Yuji refuses to let Maru carry that blame alone. He tells the officials to report him to the higher-ups and place responsibility on him if necessary. If someone has to become the face of the incident, he is willing to take the hit. Public media immediately turns the disaster into spectacle. A broadcast describes the Tokyo incident as the return of a demon from 69 years ago, and portrays the Sumerian warrior who fought it as an alien of justice protecting humanity. After all the battles and politics, the younger group finally gets something ordinary. A game of catch. Tsurugi complains that catch is boring once you stop throwing prohibited pitches, while the others tease him into playing anyway. The simple game leads into the lesson the entire conflict exposed. Nations and ethnic groups are useful labels, but they can make people overlook the individuals standing in front of them. A nation should exist for its people, not the other way around. Maru agrees that the challenges ahead are still piling up, but moments like this matter. Spending time together is how people begin to understand one another and he even compares his and Cross's techniques, Cheo's and harmony, to a kind of wish. The catch continues as life settles into something almost normal. One thing matters most to the people who survived. Yuka was saved. Even so, the consequences of Deborah's actions and the new relationship between worlds will continue long after this day. The story closes on Yuka sharing an ordinary drink with another woman. When her companion jokes that her own love life feels meaningless beside everything Yuka survived, Yuka gently disagrees. Even after curses, aliens, and war, an ordinary person's feelings still matter.